peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
It is ridiculous and it is against the laws of nature that we can have somebody sitting pretty who takes home more money than the credible entrepreneur who is doing actual production of goods and services.
We always say it as it is.
It is only in this country that when a thief is arrested, you hear elders from their tribe saying, "He is our son and he is our thief."
If you are deviant
Yes.
and I call you leader, probably you are already a leader, but you are leading in the wrong direction.
We want to see the role of the youth
Yeah.
in the security,
Yes.
governance,
Yes.
and development.
The youth that I meet and work with here, you know, we call them the millennials and X's and Y's, this and that. They don't necessarily want to live like their fathers and grandfathers,
Yes.
do business like their fathers and grandfathers. They're more independent, they're better educated, and they're the ones that are making everything move in this region.
We look at the issues, we talk about issues that impact people's lives in Africa.
The African peoples themselves continue to cheer bad leaders, and because they cheer them on, they continue to be misled.
Let me ask you, doctor, would you rather be somebody who does not enjoy so much freedom but you are rich?
Yes.
Or you'd rather be poor who you are actually imprisoned by the poverty itself?
My goal is not to come here and say, I want the majority ownership, I want to own this, I want to own that, I want to do this. My goal is we all make money and we're all happy, and I help build a big business here.
Punchline is for Africa, with Africa, from Africa.
Very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for joining me. This is Diaspora Dispatches, where we get to look at the news making headlines across the continent. Earlier on in the morning, we were dealing with news making headlines here in Kenya, and as that is where we are, Punchline Africa TV, we come to you all the way from Kenya's capital here in Nairobi. My name is Miriam Ogutu, and it is a very warm welcome to you here. Just a few minutes past 3 p.m. here, and thank you so much wherever you're joining me from. A very good morning, good evening, depending on where you're tuned in. And before I get into the news, I'd like for us to look at the latest in terms of statistics on where a few African countries stand when it comes to COVID-19. And then after that, we shall just jump right into the news making headlines. And if there's anything that is happening where you are that you think will be of interest to our viewers, please feel free to share with me on our comment section, and I will go through it and share with the rest of the world. Thank you. So we look at the statistics as they stand right now. And we start with Kenya, where the figures right now stands at 6,190 cases. The death toll in the country is 144. Recoveries stands at 2,013. Uganda, the figures right now is at 870, and recoveries is at 808. Forget Tanzania there. They've not given us the latest from, I think, mid-April or thereabout. And we go to Zambia, where the cases right now is at 1,568. 22 people have died. Recoveries stands at 1,311. Zimbabwe, 574 cases. 7 people have died, and recoveries right now stands at 152 cases there. And South Sudan, the cases also have surpassed 2,000 and right now stands at 2,006. The death toll in South Sudan is 37. Recoveries is 261. And the neighboring there from the south is, from the north is Sudan itself, and confirmed cases is at 9,257, and The death toll in Sudan is 572 and recovery stands at 4,014. Ethiopia, 5,846 cases, 103 people have died. Recoveries right now stands at 2,430. And Madagascar, also the statistics there, the numbers have gone a bit up at 2,214. And it's very interesting because I don't hear about the COVID organic, the purported herbal remedy that was supposed to be coming from Madagascar. I've not heard what has happened to that, to that medication, because even the World Health Organization and the AU and I think South Africa also had offered to take samples of that medicine and go do some tests and test its efficacy. But we don't know what became of those tests, even as the numbers there continue to rise in Madagascar. So 20 people have died and recoveries right now stands at 994. And as I said there earlier, the cases stands at 2,214. And we move to Somalia, where right now the cases also have gone up from yesterday. Today they are at 2,904. 90 people have died. Recoveries is at 910. And Congo, Brazzaville, 1,087 cases have been reported. 37 people have died, and recovery stands at 456. And the Democratic Republic of Congo, 6,939 cases. The death toll is 167. Recoveries is 1,050. And Guinea, 5,351 cases, 31 people have died, 4,296 others have recovered. That's quite good there, Guinea, because they have confirmed cases of 5,351, and out of that, only 31 people have died, and then out of the 5,351, 4,296 people have recovered. So that is quite impressive, statistics there from Guinea, and it appears as though the Guinean, government is doing something right there in terms of curbing and the treatment of COVID-19 in that country. And Rwanda, today, the statistics, it has surpassed the 1,000 mark. And the figures, confirmed cases right now is at 1,001. The death toll is 2. Recoveries is 443. And South Africa, the leading country in Africa right now, stands at 144,264. And the death toll in the continent is 2,000. In South Africa is 2,529. Recoveries is 70,616. And Egypt, which I was really surprised that it is one of the countries that has been allowed now to travel into Europe, even as the figures there are quite astounding, to be honest with you. And confirmed cases right now stands at 66,754. The death toll is 2,872. Recoveries right now stands at 17,951. And Burundi, the cases are up to 170, with one person dying and 115 others recovering. And in Algeria, the confirmed figures right now is at 25,133. The death toll is 565, and recoveries is 9,007. And we go to Ghana there, where the cases is at 17,351. The death toll is 112, and recoveries is 12,994. And Algeria, the cases are at 13,571, and the death toll is 905. Recoveries is 9,674. And Tunisia, 1,178 cases, 50 people have died, 1,029 others have recovered. And we move to where? We move to Mozambique, where they have 883 cases. 6 people have died, 229 others have recovered, and and the cases there is 883, as I have said there. And so the total cases in Africa, as per earlier this afternoon, stands at 393,479 cases, and the number of deaths that have been reported in the continent is 9,882, and recoveries in the continent so far is at 186,516 recoveries, and so far The global cases are over 10.4 million cases there. So, and the global deaths have surpassed 500,000 at 508,810. And of course, the recoveries is over 5.6 million people globally. So, thank you so much. So, that is where we stand as Africa and also globally, even as we looked at a few African countries and where they stand in terms of COVID-19. So, thank you. And if there's a country there that I've not mentioned, or perhaps a figure there that has since changed from where you're watching me from, feel free to just put in the comment section, and I will read it out for the rest of our viewers. So now let's just get into the news, and we see. And we start with Gabon, where Gabon's Senate has strongly voted in favor of decriminalizing homosexuality a week after the lower house in the National Assembly voted for a similar change. If the move is ratified by President, Gabon will become one of only African countries to legally allow homosexuality. A number of prominent politicians as well as Christian and Muslim leaders have reacted angrily, describing it as a change designed to appease foreign donors. And we go to Somalia, where a fleet of Iranian fishing vessels has been detected operating in Somali waters, according to the Somali's government and two non-governmental organizations. One of the organizations, a Global Fishing Watch, termed it as one of the world's largest illegal fishing operations. It said nearly 200 Iranian vessels were detected in Somali and Yemeni waters. Now, the Somalia government, in a statement, said the large fleet of Iranian-flagged vessels had engaged in unreported and unregulated fishing, which pose a significant threat to food security and economic development. I don't even know. Can you imagine where Somalia is? And then try to imagine where Iran is, and Iranian fishing vessels come all the way to Somali waters. I mean, there has to be more to this story. And we move to Sudan, where Sudan's Prime Minister, I beg your pardon there, Abdel Hamdok, has called for calm ahead of million-strong march to demand the implementation of the goals of the revolution that ousted long-serving leader Omar al-Bashir last year. And activists are calling for the formation of a transitional parliament, the appointment of civilian regional governors, and a reform of the country's security agencies. Now, the protests are also taking place in the midst of soaring food prices and fuel shortages. And can I add the soaring numbers there of COVID-19? And the authorities have barricaded the main roads in the capital, Khartoum, and deployed heavily towards the army headquarters, according to the local media. On Monday, government spokesperson Faisal Mohammed Saleh said the authorities arrested 9 agents from the old regime as they prepare to carry out hostile activities. It is not clear whether the arrests are related to the protest. And we move to the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Belgium's King Philippe has expressed his deepest regrets to the Democratic Republic of Congo for his country's colonial abuses. The reigning monarch made comments in a letter to President Felix Tshisekedi on the 60th anniversary of the Democratic Republic of Congo's independence. Belgium controlled the Central African country from the 19th century until it won its independence in 1960. Millions of Africans died during Belgium's bloody colonial rule. There is a renewed focus on the European nation's history after the death of George Floyd in police custody in the U.S. and the Black Lives Matter protests that followed. And then we move to Ghana, where Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo on Monday directed the country's Auditor General to take his accumulated annual leave, sparking mixed reactions from Ghanaians online. Auditor General Daniel Yao Domolevo had accumulated 132 leave days, having taken only 9 days leave since his appointment in 2016. A statement from the presidency said the order was in line with the law that requires all workers to go on leave. It cited a precedent of former president who directed a former Auditor General to take his accumulated leave of 264 days. Ghanaians on social media reacted to the president's statement differently. I don't know if the Auditor General there is just a hard-working Ghanaian, or I just don't know why. It's very interesting, this idea of president, insisting on government-appointed officials to take the accumulated leave. We saw that now ex-President Peter Mutharika, they are trying to give the Chief Justice of Malawi extended leave, and then after that, I think he would be fired because the president had said, Peter Mutharika had said that this Chief Justice had accrued about over 500 leave days there in Malawi. So we also see the same thing here happening in Ghana, where President Akufo-Addo is saying this Auditor General should go on leave because he's supposed to be going on leave, and he's accumulated about 132 leave days. And this is quite interesting. And then we head to South Sudan, where South Sudan's President Salva Kiir has appointed governors for 8 of the country's 10 regional states after sharing them out with his former rival and now the country's Vice President Riek Machar. The president also appointed superintendents for 3 administrative areas. 2 weeks ago, the two leaders ended a stalemate over control of the states, which had been a sticking point for the transitional unity government formed in February. President Kiir's camp was allocated 6 states, which included the capital city, Juba, while Mr. Machar's camp was allocated 3 states that included the major oil-producing Upper Nile state. The South Sudan Opposition Alliance was allocated Jonglei state. Leaders of each camp nominated governors for appointment by the president. Now, the governors for Upper Nile state and Jonglei state have not been nominated because of disagreements in the respective camps. Of the 8 appointed governors, only one is a woman, Sarah Cleoto Rial. And of course, a South Sudanese American citizen based in the U.S., she will be the governor for Western Bahr el Ghazal state. If you're watching me, I don't know if Manuel, you're watching. I'd like to, because you shared this information earlier on in our morning show. So I hope you're watching this. Let's have this conversation. And we move to Morocco, where French President Emmanuel Macron has accused Turkey of having what he called historic and criminal responsibility for actions it has taken in the war in Libya. Look who's talking now. Mr. Macron talked of Turkey having brought in massive numbers of jihadi fighters from Syria while increasing its own presence in the country. The Turks have given Libya's UN-backed government substantial military support that has enabled it to inflict a series of defeats on the renegade General Khalifa Haftar. France is widely seen as being among the general's international backers, who include Russia, Egypt, and United Arab Emirates. And we move to Nigeria, where Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has approved the reopening of schools in the country. But only primary and secondary school students in their final years will be allowed back into classrooms to enable them prepare for crucial examinations. Travel between Nigeria's different states will be allowed from 1st of July. That is tomorrow, as part of the gradual easing of the lockdown measures imposed in March. But a nightly nationwide curfew from about 10 local time to 4 a.m. remains in place, according to a media aide of President Buhari. Now, however, on Monday, the head of Nigeria's task force on coronavirus, Boss Mustafa, suggested that the authorities might reimpose a total lockdown in 18 of the country's 774 local government areas. And we head to the southern Africa, and there we go to Lesotho, where Lesotho's former first lady, who has been charged with murdering her husband's estranged wife, has been granted bail despite police objections that she might use it to escape. The Deputy Police Commissioner Paseka Moketem said Messiah Tambane had fled before and was likely to do so. He described her as very dangerous, and she had the resources to interfere with witnesses. Mrs. Tambane was arrested earlier this month after the appeal court revoked her bail. When police tried to question her earlier this year, she left for South Africa. She denies ordering the killing of Lipolelo Tambane, who was shot dead in the capital Maseru 3 years ago. Her husband, the former Prime Minister Thomas Tambane, also denies involvement. I think we've talked about this story, and if you don't know, then I'll let you know the story behind it. And we move to Cameroon, Well, the head of the presidential plan for the reconstruction of the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon, Paul Tassong, enters the second week of his mission in afflicted areas of the Anglophones from yesterday. After spending 1 week in the Anglophone region where he met with the various stakeholders as well as delegations from the various divisions, Paul Tassong began a similar mission in the southwest region yesterday. Mr. Tassong will kick off his mission in the southwest region, and then he'll end up meeting with the United Nations Development Program, local staff, humanitarian agencies, as well as political parties and civil society organizations active in the region. And we know the reports that have been coming from the Anglophone region there in Cameroon are not very quite disheartening. The humanitarian crisis there continues to deepen every single waking day. And we end with Burundi, where new Burundi's President Evariste Ndayishimiye unveiled a 15-member cabinet, including 2 ministers who are under the U.S. and European sanctions over their alleged role in violently crashing street protests. Ndayishimiye, 52, a retired army general, won last month's presidential election as the ruling party's candidate, defeating 6 opposition contenders. He was to take office in August, but the death of his predecessor, Pierre Nkurunziza, earlier this month brought the succession forward. The new cabinet unveiled late on Sunday includes Prime Minister Alain Guillaume Bunyoni, who has been under U.S. sanctions since 2015 over his alleged role in violations of human rights and repression of dissent during a violence sparked by Nkurunziza's decision to seek a 3rd term in office. And that is the latest from the continent this afternoon. A very good afternoon to you. So let's just go through some of this story very quickly. And we look at that story from Congo. Let's just look at that story from the Democratic Republic of Congo there. Yes, Belgium's, where the Belgium's king, Philippe, has come out to express his deepest regrets to the Democratic Republic of Congo for his country's colonial abuses. The reigning monarch made the comments in a letter to President Felix Tshisekedi on the 60th anniversary of DR Congo's independence. If you know and you have watched or you have learned or you have read anything about Congo's, Democratic of Congo's history, then you'll understand the hand of Belgium in destroying Congo as a country, and how they even facilitated the killing of Patrice Lumumba and later helping bring to power Mobutu Sese Seko, who became a literal gatekeeper there, and he stood there and watched as the countries from the West and other interests just came in and really stripped off Congo from its wealth, denied under King Leopold, Congolese were denied even education and things like that. So if you understand anything about the history of the Democratic Republic of Congo, then, King Leopold II, he's not a very good, name there when you mention it to the people of Congo. And so now that the king, the now reigning monarch, has come out to apologize and to express his deepest regrets, I think with the killing of course, George Floyd, that has brought about a lot of protests across the world and are discussed, really has opened up wounds that people assumed had been closed, had been forgotten after, especially a place like Africa, where colonialism was very brutal, was very inhumane, and after they packed their things and left, for those who left, but others we know are still very much present in this continent and are still pulling the strings. A country like France, we know, really never really left completely. So it has awakened and those wounds that people thought, okay, fine, so we have our independence, we are going on about our lives. But apparently these things are still there. And sometimes when you watch these things and you hear the history behind it, even as an African, you're like, man, this doesn't sound any better. You know, the kind of massacres, the kind of human rights abuses that happened during this time when we went through the colonialization period here in Africa is just very disheartening. So now the king, the reigning monarch there in Belgium, is coming out to apologize and express his deepest regrets there to the people of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Belgium left a mess in the DRC. And DRC has never recovered after that mess that Belgium created and left. And then, you know, that followed much later there. So I don't know if just, I see Bismarck Bura, you're saying that too late for nonsense from Belgium Palace. But what I'm thinking is, why this express of deepest regrets and apology that clearly is not going to change anything in the Democratic Republic of Congo? What else should perhaps Belgium do, owing to the amount of destruction it left in its wake there in the Democratic Republic of Congo? And if you let me just read you a bit of a history on King Leopold II. Then they built a colony that was built on forced labor and brutality, and a lot of wealth, and a lot of people who even built Belgium itself were from people from Africa and a lot of European countries, people who, colonized a lot of African countries. Their economies, their countries, their infrastructure was built on the backs of African slaves and brutality and forced labor and all that. So civilization was at the core of Leopold II's speech to European leaders in 1885 when they sliced up and allocated territories in what became known as the Scramble for Africa. He promised a humanitarian and philanthropic mission that would improve the lives of Africans. So apparently we were not very civilized, we were not very improved, and so they thought, let us go and just in this dark continent and see how we can mess up their lives even further. But in their mind they thought they were coming to civilize us, right? So he promised in return, European leaders gathered at the Berlin conference granted him 2 million square meters to forge a personal colony where he was free to do as he liked. He called it Congo Free State. Now, it quickly became a brutal, exploitative regime that relied on forced labor to cultivate and trade rubber, ivory, and minerals. Archive picture from Congo, Congo Free State documents, you can see it really shows the amount of violence and brutality that was being used during that time. And colonial administrators also kidnapped orphaned children from communities and transported them to child colonies to work or train as soldiers. Estimates suggest that more than 50% died there, and killings, famine, and disease combined to cause the deaths of perhaps 10 million people from the Democratic Republic of Congo alone. So you can imagine, and though historians dispute the true number, and Leopold II may never have set foot there, but he poured the profits into Belgium and into his own pockets. He built the African Museum in the grounds of his palace at Toveren, with a human zoo in the grounds featuring 267 Congolese people as exhibits. Process that for a moment. You are put in a zoo as an exhibit. The way you go to the museums today and you see these apes, you see, so Africans were put in this zoo as exhibits, so they were called the human zoos. But rumors of abuse began to circulate, and missionaries and British journalist Edmund Den Morel exposed the regime. And by 1908, Leopold II's rule was deemed so cruel that European leaders themselves, violently exploiting Africa, condemned it. So even the rest of the Europeans who were violently exploiting Africa felt, no, Leopold II has gone just a little bit too far. But also themselves, they were really active, participating in the violent exploitation of Africa. And of course, they came out and they condemned it, and the Belgian parliament forced him to relinquish control of his fiefdom. Now, Belgium took over the colony in 1908, and it was not until 1960 that the Republic of Congo was established after a fight for their independence. But in the chaos of the early 20th century, when World War I threatened to destroy Belgium, Leopold II's nephew, King Albert I, erected statues to remember the successes of years gone by. This makeover of Leopold's image produced an amnesia that persisted for decades, and we saw one of those what do you call them? Statues are being, of course, removed there. So now, the current protest, as we see in Belgium's ugly history, Congo has been contested in the streets. We've seen some Congolese coming out and organizing protests about Belgium and what it has done to its own history and its own people early in those years. So in 2019, the cities of Kortrijk and Dendermonde renamed their Leopold second streets, with Kortrijk Council describing the king as a mass murderer. And in 2018, Brussels named a public square in honor of Patrice Lumumba, a hero of African independence movements and the first prime minister of Congo since and renamed the Democratic Republic of Congo. And last year, a United Nations working group called on Belgium to apologize for atrocities committed during the colonial era. So we see here, it has taken the monarch, the reigning monarch. We know, as I've read there sometimes back last year, there were calls for Belgium to really, apologize for those ill things it did to the people of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And it took the reigning monarch now, the protest all over the US and other parts of the world for it to come and, reconcile. I don't think that they've even reconciled their past with their future. Those are history that they try to not even teach. As I said here before, even when you go to United Kingdom, British and Britain there, they don't teach in their schools, in their curriculum. There's no place they teach about colonialization. They don't teach that. That is not something they want the young British to learn about. And that's why those young white kids over there, they grow up in a society. They don't understand their history and what their country, the atrocities that the British government committed, the British Empire committed in Africa and other places like India and across the world. And so they're just ignorant on very important issues and very important part of the British history there that they're not taught in schools. So that's why they don't understand. And so when you see some of these things happening in there, you realize a lot of even black people over in the US right now who have been still facing a lot of discrimination and all that. A lot of their great-great-great-grandparents who found themselves there did not go there voluntarily. A lot of them are forced into there through slavery. So these are things that they must be taught, especially from that side of the world, so that they're able to understand what really happened. So for King, I don't know my viewers out there who are watching right now, by the reigning monarch of Belgium coming out to apologize and to express his deepest regrets to the people of the Democratic of Congo, even as Congo was marking its 60th, independence anniversary there. I don't know if there's anything even to be proud about there in Congo, because we saw Belgium, after facilitating the killing of Patrice Lumumba and installing that Mobutu Sese Seko, we saw how they continue to plunder the wealth that is in Congo, because he was working in cahoots and they protected him. And he did very terrible things, Mobutu himself, but he was protected by the international community. And when he went there, the red carpet was rolled and he was given, a very good treatment, because they knew they were cooperating, and he acted as their gatekeeper when it came to the plundering of Congo's wealth. And Congo has never been the same again. Congo, I don't know if it will ever be the same again, because even they will not allow for peace and for normalcy to return in Congo, because those powers that pull the strings there in the Democratic Republic of Congo, they continue to do that. Maybe not as outright, but they continue to do that. We see a lot of rise of militia groups. We see a lot of rise of, the killings and the chaos and the insecurity and the civil wars in some parts of Congo there. And a lot of players are there, of course, representing their own interests. And so they, of course, benefit when a chaos like that continues in Congo. They will never allow a country like Congo, a country that is so wealthy, one of the wealthiest countries across the world, Congo can take care of all our budgets if the wealth in Congo was properly managed, can be giving us loans here in the continent. Will not even have to go to the World Bank or the IMF and all that. So they understand the wealth that is in Congo, that Belgium left in chaos and ensured during that time, they ensured that the Congolese never went to school. So they never understood how to run very important sectors of the economy. So when they left, really, they were left people who were semi-illiterate, could not understand a lot of things and how they were operating. So they continued with their plunder and all that. So I don't know if this apology from the reigning monarch there in Belgium has come in just a little too late. But Bismarck Bura, you're saying that might be a tad too late. And James Botoro, you're saying, I like your stories around African countries. The analysis is even better. Good job. Oh, thank you, James. Thank you for watching. And please, I always love to hear, and this is a very interactive show. So that's why I keep reading your comments, because I want to know what you're saying, and I want to know what other information you have for me out there, because a lot of our viewers here are very resourceful. So usually I'll get to learn something here or get to know some news that is breaking elsewhere that I might not have captured. But thank you so much for watching. And Bismarck Bura, you're also saying, Miriam, they are focusing their eyes on the natural resources of Congo. Again, what do you mean again? I don't think they ever stopped. They have continued, and that's why Congo can never enjoy a state of normalcy. Every time you hear from what is happening from Kivu and other states and other places there in Congo, there's no day you'll hear everything is okay there in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And so I don't know about this apology by the reigning monarch there, and Belgium's King Philippe there coming out and expressing his deepest regrets, and an apology was demanded for last year, but he did not bother to give that apology. So now that the world is woke and Black Lives Matter, and now the people are bringing down all these statues of these people who committed atrocities during those days. Now he has the audacity to come out and say, we deeply regret, we apologize. And yet Belgium was built in the backs of the people of the Democratic of Congo. Belgium was built through the wealth that was being plundered from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And it has continued to thrive while Congo continues with chaos that they left in the wake of even them leaving there. So I don't know, this apology does not make any sense to me at all. I don't know. Let me know what you make of that. And another ridiculous story coming from Ghana. President Nana Akufo-Addo directing the Auditor General to go on and enjoy his accumulated leaves of 132 days. I don't know. There has to be more to this story, and I will look for more information, and I'll come to you tomorrow, and we shall have more of this talk. So South Sudan, the leaders there seems to be making some progress, and now we see that President Salva Kiir has appointed governors for 8 of the country's 10 regional states after sharing them out with his former rival and now country's Vice President Riek Machar. Well, I haven't seen any group come out to oppose this latest appointment, so I guess it's a good thing. I guess they've all agreed, and it's good process, slowly but surely, but I think it's a good process, and they should continue like that. And now I hope that they can address the matter of insecurity in South Sudan. The last time you were talking here, some very disheartening information, and the U.S. has received a report twice about the presence of young underage children as part of South Sudan's army. They're being trained, and they are in the military training of becoming a South Sudan's military army. I don't know in what world this is supposed to be okay, but it's not okay. And so the last time we were having this conversation about South Sudan, we were urging President Salva Kiir as the Commander-in-Chief of the Republic, of the Armed Forces there in South Sudan, to take charge and ensure things like this don't happen. So I hope that they are able to address the matter of security, because even if, as much as they continue addressing the states, which also was the leading contentious issues, remember when they could not agree on anything, this was one of the things. But we see they've made progress since the naming or the appointment of these 8 governors. I've not had a lot of hullabaloo, so I'm assuming parties there are okay with the current states there. We don't want to hear the next day you come there and to hear now so-and-so's camp is not very happy with this, so-and-so's camp is not, is aggrieved with whatever President Salva Kiir has said, but I see so far we've not heard any complaints. So I'm assuming both parties or all the stakeholders there are actually okay with this and current appointments that have been made by Salva Kiir. And I think he made appointments from his side, because the rest of other parties who are allocated the number of states, whichever numbers, they were to appoint, they were to forward the names of the people, the governors that they wanted to be appointed in those states. So I guess it's a good thing, but that is not enough. And I think also the other day when we were talking about South Sudan, I could not understand the obsession of South Sudan's leadership with the numbers. They have to have the majority of they have to be the country with the majority of vice presidents in the world. They have to have to be the country in Africa, very small compared to other countries, but have the most members of parliament right now. The MPs numbers are expected to rise from 400 to 550, but this was part of the revitalized peace agreement there. So really, there's nothing much I think can be done about it, but that is just exorbitant. With a country that is struggling to even pay its own civil servants, with a country that is struggling to even feed its own people, forget that. I mean, scratch that. South Sudan cannot even feed its own people, right? And it relies on donor funding there. So for a country that is really, really struggling, and you want to have this bloated, parliament, bloated officials there, numbers there, I don't understand, because it has proved that having more numbers does not necessarily mean that everybody else will be happy and you'll please the whole country. You've had 5 vice presidents thinking that you're solving a problem and you're having everybody else included. That has not worked. That did not stop the war. That has not stopped the killings that have been happening and continue to happen in South Sudan. So perhaps they need to find another formula and strategy in solving the problems that is not inclusive of increasing these numbers in parliament and in other states. And we also saw that list of ministers that President Salva Kiir had after the signing of the peace deal there in February. And when you look at the ministries there, you see a lot of duplication of responsibilities. You wonder, why do you have the minister of dams at the same time you have a minister of water? How does that even make sense? It does not make sense at all. And you just can't have things for the sake of having things, and yet these positions, these people, you can't even pay them. That is just utter ridiculous. You're just jumping from the frying pan to the fire, and you're not solving any thing there in South Sudan. So, all right. Now, this is very interesting. The fleet of Iranian fishing vessels that have been detected operating in Somali waters. Please, I know my geography is not par, but can you close your eyes and imagine with me where Somalia is, the Horn of Africa, right? Just close to Kenya. And then imagine with me where Iran is, and then try to imagine or try to figure out how Iranian fishing vessels will find its way into Somalia and they will come fishing in Somalia's water. That does not make any sense. And this is also another story that I think there's more to this story. And I will look into the details of it, and I will come here with more details. So now let's just jump into Sudan. And of course, Sudan's Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok is calling people to calm down. Remember the 1 million strong march that is demanding of the implementation of the goals of the revolution that ousted long-serving leader Omar al-Bashir last year. Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok is talking on behalf of the civilian side and the protester side. But they are together. 5 of the civilians from the protest side and 5 from the military side. So they formed this transitional government there in Sudan. And as we speak, I think we all know by now that Sudan's constitution was suspended during that time of the protest last year, before President Omar al-Bashir was ousted. So the country basically is just trying to put things in order and perhaps a new constitution in the offing. As it is now, they do not have a constitution. So now, there has been a tug of war between the protest side and the military side. Of course, the military side, a lot of these people are still very loyal to the former President Omar al-Bashir. They worked under him. He was their commander-in-chief. They've had a long, lengthy relationship. Omar al-Bashir was president in that country for 30 years. So these are people who worked with him. When you look at the second in command in the military, Mr. Hemeti, as he is famously known, he is the head of the Sudan Rapid Force, in other words, Janjaweed. And that Janjaweed, Omar al-Bashir used when he wanted to rein on dissenting voices in the country. We saw what they did in Darfur. We see they're the ones that Omar al-Bashir also gives when it goes to the fight that is happening in Yemen. And that's why Sudan is a very strategic country in terms of the proxy war that is going on even in Yemen, because they get to borrow the soldiers from Sudan who are in the Janjaweed, because they're very brutal. And we saw what they did last year. Remember on the 3rd of June? When they killed so many protesters there. And so the protest side, or the civilian side, they have their own things that they want to be implemented. They have their own ideas on how they want the government of Sudan to be like. But the military side also are still very loyal to the former president. Remember, there has been calls by the ICC to have this person handed over to the ICC. And I remember early in the year, the protest side, the leaders there came out and said, this is something that perhaps you're thinking about. But since then, we've not heard any new developments in that story, because there's no way the military side will agree. Because if they take Omar al-Bashir to the ICC to face some of these charges that happened, to be answerable to the deaths and the atrocities that happened in the Darfur region. Remember that war that claimed so many lives. Omar al-Bashir, he has a warrant of arrest over that. And Omar al-Bashir did not pick a gun physically and go kill anybody in Darfur. I don't think he did that. It is these generals that are now part of the transition government that perhaps ordered or even participated actively in the killings and in these atrocities. So there's no way they're going to hand over al-Bashir to the ICC, because he is going to name names. Al-Bashir has nothing to lose at this point. He's been stripped everything that made him who he was. And so at this time, he'll just sit there, name names, and perhaps the jails there at the ICC are very comfortable. But these generals, I think they have everything to lose, because I don't think they have to. The sacrifice that would come with that will be such a huge price tag that I don't think they'll be willing to give into. So that has been a tug of war between the protest side that is led by the Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok, and also the military side. And so we see here the protest, the civilians there want to organize another march that which happened last year. Remember the 1 million march that happened there, that had the protesters camping at the military base that also housed the official residence of the president there, Omar al-Bashir, that later on led him to be ousted there. So they want to organize that. I'm not sure if the army is very happy, because as we see now, the army has deployed heavy artillery around the headquarters, so it will not be allowing any kind of agitation from the protesters. So this is something that we shall be looking to see. And on Monday, government spokesman Faisal Mohammed Saleh said that the authorities arrested 9 agents from the old regime as they prepared to carry out hostile activities. It is not clear whether the arrests are related to the protest. So you see some elements there are still trying to be fishy and perhaps do things that are not quite proper there. And we move to Lesotho. It's a story I think we've been following. If you've been watching Diaspora Dispatches, it's a story that I've been talking about. And the former First Lady, caught allegedly connived with the former Prime Minister there, Thomas Tambane. Now the current wife, Messiah Tambane, they killed allegedly, because the investigations are still continuing. They killed the wife, the ex-wife. She was not even ex, because the couple was going through a very bitter divorce there in Lesotho. So now what happened? Her name was Lipolelo. Now Lipolelo had decided Mr. Thomas Tambane was not going to divorce her. divorce, that was not something she was going for. And so, but Thomas Tambane, who was at that time campaigning and had been elected but was about to be sworn in, they were going through the bitter divorce in the courts, and the ex-wife or the former wife, or now the late wife, did not want to be divorced. And at that time, Mr. Tambane was already seeing this other woman, Messiah Tambane. I think they had moved in together or something like that. So just 2 days before he's sworn in, his wife, who they were having a bitter divorce case in the court, was murdered when she was about to close to her residence there in the capital, I think Maseu. So now it appeared it was well orchestrated, that at that time the police did not suspect any foul play. And then years later, apparently they had been investigating, and the Prime Minister did not know. And so now it had been the investigations brought them to the steps of the Prime Minister, who is now the husband of the late wife, and his new wife, Messiah Tambane, who is said to have orchestrated the killing of the Prime Minister's ex-wife. Of course, the case has seen Thomas Tambane leave office. He did that, I think last month, but he had refused to leave the office. And then later on, I think due to pressure, he came out and he said that, due to old age, he will be stepping down. And so he did. So right now, Messiah has been under police custody, and she is a flight risk, as we've seen their police say. So I don't know if they'll be allowing her to leave, but that is what is happening there. So something very interesting just before I leave. This news from the French President, Emmanuel Macron, accusing Turkey of having what he called historic and criminal responsibility for actions it had taken in the war in Libya. Now, Mr. Macron talked of Turkey having brought in massive numbers of jihadist fighters from Syria while increasing its own presence in the country. Now, the Turks have given Libya's UN-backed government substantial military support that has enabled it to inflict a series of defeats on the renegade Khalifa Haftar. Now, France is widely seen as being among the general's international backers, who include Russia, Egypt, and UAE. And we saw also Russia bringing in there some mercenaries. There was some credible information that shows that Russian mercenaries are in Libya, and of course they are supporting the caliphate, Khalifa Haftar, the general. Now, what I don't understand is why French President Emmanuel Macron, who we know France has been mentioned extensively about its role in the chaos and the war that is happening there in Libya right now. And France, being a member of a permanent member at the United Nations Security Council, has not helped the matter at all because it has been in support. France, a member, okay, calm down. Let's get this together. France, a member of the United Nations Security Council, a permanent member, all right, supporting General Khalifa Haftar, who is fighting United Nations-backed government in Libya. How is that even possible? But that is what is happening. France has participated, is very active, and is an active participant in the chaos that we see in Libya today. And so Turkey had seen the molestation that was going on for the United Nations-backed government there, and he came out and he's been helping. I think earlier, sometimes back this year, he came out and said he will be supporting, the United Nations-backed government there. And so since they have, through the help from the backing from Turkey, General Haftar has been able to be defeated in a lot of places that he had captured. He'd been moved very far. So after that, now we see Egypt also a very active player in this war, trying to just now mediate, and yet Egypt also is not to be supporting Khalifa Haftar. So Egypt tried to, set up these mediation talks and try to find solutions and try to bring everybody on table. How do you do that? And yet you're not a neutral, participant there. You're an active participant in this war. Egypt, France, they fight together. They help in fighting the United Nations recognized government there in Libya. So for French government, President president to come out, Emmanuel Macron, and accuse Turkey of having what he called historic and criminal responsibility for actions it had taken in the war in Libya. What responsibility is France taking in its contribution to the war and the deaths that we see today in Libya? What responsibility is Libya taking, for some of even the what do you call them? Some of the things that is, Khalifa Haftar is using, very sophisticated weapons that some others have been traced to be coming from France. What responsibility is France taking in the chaos that is in Libya today, and it has refused to use its position? Now we see Russia also siding with it to continue fighting a United Nations-backed government, and French president has the audacity to come in and accuse, Turkey of what he calls the historic and criminal responsibility. I think French also has criminal responsibility. Also, French should take responsibility on and its contribution to what has become this melting point of just chaos and civil war and killings. And we've seen parts of Libya has been completely destroyed, a country that once was flourishing in the continent, that the citizens there, Libya had the best in terms of everything, and even the social structures there, took care of its own people. But now, after the killing there and the Arab uprising that happened in 2011, Libya has never been the same again. And I don't think it will ever be the same again because of the continued conflict of interest that happens in this country. And now all these players have brought in the proxy wars there in Libya. And so we may never be able to see the end of this war there. So I just do not understand the hypocrisy of French president coming in there and accusing Turkey. Of course, Turkey has also caused some level of damage, but that cannot compare with what France has done there. So for France to come there and accuse Turkey and of historic and criminal responsibility and basically absorbing itself from that, I think is quite hypocritical, and it's not right. And I think France, President Emmanuel Macron, France should take responsibility on its part in the chaos and the killings and the destruction that is happening in Libya today, because France has aided, France has supported, France has equipped General Khalifa Haftar, and he is fighting United Nations recognized government there. So President Emmanuel Macron, just stop with the hypocrisy. This has been Diaspora Dispatches. My name is Miriam Mugutu. We meet here tomorrow. Bye-bye for now.
Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.